In researching the Williamsburg Bridge, I was trying to find videos about it, and I stumbled down this rabbit hole of people climbing the Williamsburg Bridge. Have you ever seen this or heard of people doing this?
I've heard of people doing it with the Brooklyn Bridge as well.
Oh, really?
Because you can get onto the wires.
It's like, it's terrifying to me. It's so, and like, so there's like so many videos of people that go onto the Williamsburg Bridge, and I guess if you go into the center, you like climb up onto the beams and they cross over, and you like can climb all the way up and then sit at the top and see the city. And I mean, it looks beautiful, but like it's beautiful not on the top, like it's beautiful in the middle too. And then they like descend down the suspension wire. And I don't know. It's just like, it's, I feel like.
Like how? How do they get down the?
So there's like a pole you can walk down, and then there's the wires that are next to the pole. And it's actually what the like workers would use, like people that were going up to fix the bridge. That's how they would get down as well. But they would be in safety gear and like strapped on, and they wouldn't be carrying like a camera rig. And it would maybe be like there'd be people aware and like help, like watching them. It wouldn't be like in the cover of night. But yeah, this is just an aside and something that I really like got interested in, and how like just thinking about how like this structure, it's like made for a specific use, and then we like judge it by all sorts of like aesthetic beauty and like how much traffic is on it and like practical things, but then it also, things just like become like whatever people want them to be. It just like becomes a playground.
Yeah, I guess if it's there, you want to climb it. There are always people that want to do that. It takes a certain type of constitution, or like a missing part of your brain. I don't know. That for me, it just, I would instantly like not want to go more than 10 steps up.
I don't think I could.
Yeah.
I can't even, like when we go hiking and there's a fire tower, I physically freeze.
Yeah.
I used to love going into abandoned buildings and exploring them, and often like those would be like, you know, missing floors and stuff like that. It was totally a thing. I felt like my brain wasn't missing, but it was totally a thing where I just like, you know, it was like an alternative to like getting wasted. It was like, you know, breaking into a property and like actually kind of exploring it and stuff.
It's like it must be an adrenaline thing
totally.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I bet when you're done, you probably feel powerful. Like, I got away with that. I'm still alive. I'm invincible. Like, it probably gives you like a real big.
Yeah, I can fly.
Right. At least I believe I can fly.
Yeah.
I think I can fly. Yeah.
So for this bridge, it was opened in 1903, the middle of the three bridges that we're talking about today. It was the first bridge completed as New York was a fully incorporated city, I guess if you want to call it that, with all the boroughs joined together. It connected the tenement side of the Lower East Side to the industrial residential side of Williamsburg, which caused some strife once it was completed, as people from the Lower East Side sought homes on the other side of the bridge, which was part of the city's design, it would seem. But of course, people on the other side, particularly those that had money, were not happy with the fact that people with less incomes were moving into their neighborhood, which is, if it sounds familiar, that's because that's the history of humanity, I guess. People don't like to share, you know. And so an interesting thing that I learned from the podcast was that Williamsburg was separate from Brooklyn until only 20 years prior to the bridge. You know, it was the 1860s or 1870s, I think, was when it was incorporated into Brooklyn. And that was kind of the case for several sections of Brooklyn, that they all were independent entities. And consolidation, although consolidation with Brooklyn had happened by the time the bridge was built, there was this real acceleration that came with the Brooklyn Bridge of, I think, everybody thinking like, let's get it all together in one form. And so that was, Williamsburg was called the Eastern District And it was a separate thing entirely from where we are now, the area we are now. And so they were clamoring for their own bridge because there was a lot of economic incentive to get a bridge over to that area. And that is how the bridge, if you ever wondered why the bridges are where they are, it's because there was kind of a separate identity, while we think today that there is all one identity, that was motivating that. And in fact, some of the investors in that area included Charles Pfizer, which is super relevant to today's because Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, our current vaccine friends, were German investors in the Williamsburg area. So
if it weren't for the Williamsburg Bridge, maybe we'd still be waiting for a vaccine.
Maybe.
Or
I think that's the most logical connection. Yeah. And as far as the appearance of it, I've always noticed that it was, considered an ugly bridge at the day. And it looked like a railroad bridge. I mean, and honestly, if you think about it objectively, it looks like something you might see in the country somewhere, just spanning a space and not particular, aesthetic concern. And I never really noticed that the bridge also looks like that in the bottom too. Like it just goes all the way straight down, like it were a transformer tower or something, And for me, I quite like how it looks. I don't, it speaks to another type of Brooklyn aesthetic. Like if the Brooklyn Bridge speaks to one type of Brooklyn aesthetic, then the Williamsburg Bridge speaks to another type of aesthetic,
I think it's more, maybe this is related to architecture too, because I think it's maybe more like modern aesthetically than it was at that time. Like I was listening to something a little bit ago too about the George Washington Bridge, which I think looks kind of similar to the Williamsburg Bridge. And it was saying that when that bridge was being built, they wanted to make it look more like the Brooklyn Bridge, but by then, like, that kind of thing had fallen out of style, and this more, like, steel structure was what people liked. So I wonder if now we just, like, we like that, but at the time, maybe it was, like, too
modern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very concerned with the engineering aspect of the bridge and not concerned with the aesthetics at the time.
Yeah.
But that itself is its own perspective and an aesthetic as a consequence.
Yeah. The Eiffel Tower had that same issue when it was first built.
Right, yeah.
And I feel like has kind of a similar aesthetic in some ways.
Yeah, I think that was brought up in the podcast as well, that it was successfully pulled off there, or at least, I don't know, I know there were certainly a lot of artists that were on the record at the time as saying that it was like a nightmare, that the Eiffel Tower, and I could imagine that people that are used to one idea of what Paris looks like would think that that was unnecessary.
So Eiffel also designed the inner structure of the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, which is actually, like, if you look at like a section through it, you kind of understand that like there's a similar logic. Also a really tall thing, essentially, that's clad in metal.
Oh, interesting.
Except that because it's like the sort of form of a figure, there is sort of like the logical structure as the primary structure, and then there's like this substructure that negotiates sort of like the clothing and the body and stuff related to the more logical structure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's a fun fact.
I don't know what the current status is, but going inside of the Eiffel Tower is one of the cool, Eiffel Tower is cool. Statue of Liberty cooler because you feel like you're kind of inside of this cloak.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I ever actually went into it. I definitely like went to the Statue of Liberty on field trips growing up, but I think like it's something I'd be more interested in doing now. As a kid, I was almost like too jaded or something.
Right.
Like now I would actually be really interested in seeing that. But yeah, I probably would have been more interested in like
it's
going
really
to the
cool.
local H&M or something. Stupid.
They closed it down for a long time after September 11th, but then they reopened it, I think, a few years into when I lived in the city, so maybe in like 2012, but I want to go again, so we should do it.
Yeah. As far as walking the Williamsburg Bridge, the experience of it, I like it for several reasons. I like it because it feels gritty. I love all the graffiti on it. I love the stickers on it. It is much more ambience-wise, more friendly than the Manhattan Bridge because it's not as loud, even though there's trains. And it is more friendly than the Brooklyn Bridge in typical times because there's not as many people. It's much more a commuter bridge for pedestrians. And then the third thing that I like about it, if I am understanding the terminology correctly, is all the trusses that are on top of the pedestrian and the biking side that create this, not the same thing as all the wiring in the Brooklyn Bridge, but kind of another optical illusion of its own.
Yeah.
Where there's just hundreds of these. I don't know if it's pink or red. Is that am I imagining it the right color?
I think of it as pink.
Is it pink? Okay.
But I think it maybe is red faded. But
Yeah,
I think of it as a pink bridge, which I love.
Yeah, and just to be able to look down the entire length and see hundreds of these, or just a level that the brain can't comprehend anymore, that it feels like it might as well be forever, the length that you can see it.
Yeah.
It's a really, it feels like some sort of teleportation tube to in between the boroughs. And I don't recall when I first traversed the city, but I do, or the bridge, but I do remember it being a really meaningful moment to every time prior using a train or a car to get between the two. But once you crack that barrier and are able to physically move between the two islands, it was an eye-opener in some way,
It's funny that you say that because I think my first experience going over the Williamsburg Bridge, not in a car or a train, was when I was living in the city and I bought a bicycle off Craigslist, and it was this old pink. It was pink, so good for the pink bridge, but it was pink and it was a cruiser, and I wasn't a good bicyclist to begin with, and it was this old creaky cruiser, and I brought it back over the Williamsburg Bridge, and it was the worst experience I ever had. And I was that bridge sucks, it's so steep, and I hate biking, really ruined so many things for so many years. I don't think I went over the Williamsburg Bridge at all for maybe 5 years after that.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say I love it for that reason. Because when you're biking back from Manhattan, it's so steep and it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you've got people walking up and you've got biker, for me, there's always some biker faster trying to pass me. And it's just and then suddenly it dead ends, right at those the two
where you have
piers at the end.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to turn left. It's completely dangerous, but it's really fun.
Right.
Especially on a heavy bike, a city bike
or something.
or whatever.
Yeah. Speaking of biking over, when I was researching again for all of this, I watched a video of someone from Transportation Alternatives, which relates to, we talked to Bahij last week, who's a biker and does a lot with Transportation Alternatives, but it was right before when they announced that the L train was going to get shut down, which was maybe 4 years ago or something. There was a period of time between when they announced and it was actually happening where there was a lot of talk about how are people from Williamsburg going to get into the city. And there was this guy, I forget his name right now, but he did what's called Everesting, which I had never heard of before, but it's where bikers will go somewhere that's not Everest, but they'll bike the height of Everest all in one. So he, as trying to raise awareness for needing better pedestrian travel to get into the city, he Everested the Williamsburg Bridge, and it took him 26 hours, and he did it straight through just on Red Bull, bananas, and nuts or something. But do you understand what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Because there's a certain elevation, he had to do it.
Oh wow.
265 times or something. And it was just, they interviewed him at hour 24, and he was just yep, it's very important. They're trying to ask him like, why are you doing this? He's like trying to give like a really good answer, but he's like been awake for 24 hours biking back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could, like, I guess I would recommend watching that video. But I also just thought it was yet again like another thing that using that bridge as a way to bring attention to something. And I think probably him doing that did make more, like, the bike lanes are much better now. Like, the area right off of the bridge on either side, I think, are a lot better than they had been before.
Yeah.
Yeah.